They struck without warning. No declaration, no press briefing, no diplomatic note. In the dead of night, the skies over Michoacán and Sinaloa lit up like a war zone, because that's what it had quietly become. In February 2025, behind layers of secured doors in Washington, D.C., the Trump administration made a decision that would redraw the boundaries of warfare and international law. After weeks of classified briefings with the Department of Defense and senior intelligence brass, the United States formally reclassified Mexican drug cartels. They were no longer seen as criminal syndicates. From now on, they would be treated as foreign terrorist organizations. It wasn't just semantics. This designation flipped a switch, unleashing a military playbook once reserved for jihadist groups in the Middle East. The change opened the floodgates. MQ-9 Reaper drones, GBU-12 precision bombs, thermal satellite tracking, and covert surveillance operations. But this time, the targets weren't in Mosul or Kandahar. They were across the southern border, hiding in jungle labs, ranch hideouts, and hillside villas. The mission: take the fight to the cartels. Not with agents and wiretaps, but with military-grade firepower. And the reason? In 2024, more than 80,000 Americans died from fentanyl overdoses. That's more than the U.S. combat deaths in the Vietnam War. The message was clear. If you're sending poison into American towns, you'll be treated as a national security threat and eliminated like one. The campaign began after months of silent preparation. U-2 spy planes, stealth satellites, and embedded assets gathered intel on cartel movements. Drug labs were mapped. Supply routes were logged. 18 covert surveillance missions fed live coordinates to Pentagon war rooms. When the green light came, the drones were already in the air. Their targets: high-ranking cartel commanders asleep in heavily guarded compounds. The weapons: Hellfire missiles and laser-guided bombs. The result: immediate, devastating, surgical. Officials believed this timing would limit civilian casualties and maximize the element of surprise. When the drones crossed into Mexican airspace, no warning was given. Moments later, explosions echoed through cartel compounds. Warehouses storing fentanyl precursors erupted into fireballs. Safe houses used by senior cartel leaders were reduced to rubble. The operation was swift, lethal, and highly coordinated. However, even in this carefully planned assault, the administration was aware of the risks. Mexico had not approved the strikes. No joint operation had been declared. Although the targets were cartel-related, the attacks took place on sovereign territory. Some voices inside the Pentagon cautioned against going forward without diplomatic clearance. They feared retaliation or the collapse of years of security cooperation. Others argued that the cost of inaction was too high. The cartels were already destabilizing Mexico. Now they were killing Americans by the thousands. Waiting any longer, they said, would only invite more death. Ultimately, political momentum carried the decision across the finish line. Public opinion in the U.S. had shifted. Families affected by the opioid crisis demanded justice. Lawmakers called for bold measures. And when the cartels were labeled as terrorists, the military had all the authority it needed to strike. What was once a law enforcement issue was now a battlefield. Critics immediately raised alarms. They questioned the precedent being set. Were Mexican gangs truly terrorists? What about the risk of civilian harm? Could this spiral into a broader regional conflict? Supporters, however, saw it as a necessary evolution. Cartels used military-grade weapons. They corrupted governments. They killed indiscriminately in every way that mattered. They behaved like terrorist organizations. The new designation, in their view, acknowledged a brutal reality. Inside military command centers, the mood was focused but tense. Drone pilots reviewed last-minute changes to flight plans. Intelligence analysts double-checked target packages. Legal teams ensured every strike met the new rules of engagement. The launch orders came late at night. Soon, dozens of drones were airborne, flying silently toward their marks. At 2:13 a.m. local time, the first bomb hit a suspected cartel weapons depot in Sinaloa. Minutes later, a second drone struck a meth lab tucked in the forests of Michoacán. By sunrise, 10 sites had been hit. Surveillance confirmed multiple secondary explosions, indicating the presence of munitions. Radio chatter among cartel operatives went dark. The mission was declared a success. Still, damage reports began to emerge. A nearby home was partially destroyed. A child was injured by flying debris. Mexican media reported several civilian casualties. Though unverified, these reports fueled outrage in Mexico City. President Shinbomb's government had not been warned. Within hours, she appeared on national television condemning the strikes as an attack on national sovereignty. Back in Washington, officials stood firm. They emphasized that every effort had been made to minimize harm. They cited intelligence, surveillance footage, and precision targeting, but they knew the fallout would come. Mexico took decisive steps to back up Shinbomb's words in the following days. The government proposed constitutional amendments to strengthen defenses against foreign military actions. These changes would restrict airspace access and require approval for any external operations on Mexican soil. Lawmakers moved quickly, driven by a shared sense of urgency. At the same time, Mexico suspended its intelligence sharing agreements with the United States. This move severed a key link in the fight against drug trafficking, which had relied heavily on joint efforts. Shinbomb clarified that Mexico would confront the cartels on its terms, free from foreign meddling. The decision was a bold assertion of autonomy, but it carried risks in a battle that demands resources and coordination. Before the strikes, Mexico and the U.S. had built a strong partnership. Mexico had stationed 10,000 troops along the border to stop smuggling and violence. It had also extradited 29 cartel suspects in 2024 alone, a sign of trust and cooperation. The drone attacks unraveled that progress in an instant. Shinbomb saw them as disrespecting Mexico's efforts, a unilateral choice that ignored its role in the fight. Her administration responded by halting all further extraditions, freezing a process that had been a cornerstone of bilateral security. This shift marked a turning point, signaling that Mexico would no longer bend to U.S. pressure, even at the cost of slowing justice for cartel leaders. The public reaction was just as forceful. In Mexico City, thousands poured into the streets, their anger spilling over into protests. They burned American flags and chanted against what they called imperialism from Washington. For many, the airstrikes didn't just shake the cartels. They stirred ghosts, memories of a long and bitter history. Decades of American intervention, covert operations, and political leverage came rushing back. This wasn't just about drones or compounds. To many in Mexico, it felt like another chapter in a book they never got to write. Protests erupted across the country. Students, labor unions, veterans, families. From Chiapas to Chihuahua, a singular chant echoed. Respeto, no ocupación. Respect, not occupation. Media outlets ran wall-to-wall coverage. Headlines screamed of sovereignty violated. TV panels asked if Mexico was still in control of its own skies. The diplomatic blowback was immediate. Extraditions were frozen. Intelligence sharing stalled. But the aftershocks went deeper. The USMCA, North America's cornerstone trade pact, entered sudden uncertainty. Negotiators walked out. Immigration control, once a point of coordination, began to crumble. With trust fractured, Mexico's help in managing migrant flows vanished. Border crossings spiked overnight, and U.S. officials scrambled to respond. A mission meant to stop criminal empires had unintentionally opened a geopolitical fault line. One analyst put it bluntly: when borders divide allies, cartels get stronger. And the cartels were already adapting, rerouting operations, building alliances, going deeper underground. They partnered with Central American gangs. They dug new tunnels. They vanished from the skies and melted back into the shadows. In Washington, debate raged. Some called the strikes bold leadership. Others warned they were a strategic blunder, sacrificing long-term partnership for short-term wins. In Mexico, President Shinbomb's defiant tone rallied national pride. But behind closed doors, questions mounted. Could Mexico win this war alone? The cartels aren't just armed groups. They are parallel powers, with their own economies, their own enforcers, and deep roots in every level of society. The U.S. strikes delivered a blow, but not a knockout. The cartels absorbed it. They learned. They adjusted. And they're still very much alive. The war on drugs has entered a new phase. But in this war, firepower alone is not enough. Trust must be rebuilt. Strategy must evolve. Or else, the next drone strike won't be the end. It'll just be the beginning.